Mr. Funny's Red-Nosed Day. Mr. Funny is funny. He sleeps in a boat-shaped bed in a teapot-shaped house, outside of which is parked his shoe-shaped car. And all these things make people laugh, and Mr. Funny likes to make people laugh. He is very good at it. Or so he thought, until Mr. Funny met Mr. Grumpy, because Mr. Grumpy did not laugh. Mr. Grumpy did not grin. Mr. Grumpy did not even smile. Mr. Funny pulled the funniest face he knew how to, a face he saved for special occasions, but not even a flicker of a smile appeared at the corners of Mr. Grumpy's mouth. Mr. Funny invited Mr. Grumpy for a drive in his shoe-shaped car. Mr. Funny had thought of just the place to take Mr. Grumpy to cheer him up. They drove to Nonsense Land, where they saw a dog out walking his pet worm. Mr. Grumpy did not smile. They saw a giraffe wearing Wellington boots. Mr. Grumpy still did not smile. They even saw a hippopotamus wearing a spotty bow tie. The hippopotamus looked pleased with himself. It was a very funny sight indeed. Mr. Grumpy sat stony-faced in the back of the car. Nothing he had seen had produced even a glimmer of a smile. Mr. Funny thought very hard, and then he had another idea. He drove to his house, his teapot-shaped house. "Wait here," said Mr. Funny, and he popped into the kitchen. He came back carrying a tea tray, but Mr. Grumpy did not notice this. What he did notice was the size of Mr. Funny's nose. It had grown. Mr. Grumpy's eyes opened wide, and for the first time in a very long time, Mr. Grumpy's mouth did not turn down at the ends. "Oh, I forgot the sugar bowl," said Mr. Funny, going back into the kitchen. When he came back, his nose was even bigger. Mr. Grumpy actually smiled. "Oh, I forgot the teaspoons," said Mr. Funny. This time he returned wearing the largest, most ridiculous, quite preposterous red nose you have ever seen. "That's ridiculous," snorted Mr. Grumpy. "I know," giggled Mr. Funny. Then Mr. Grumpy snorted again, and the snort turned into a chuckle, and the chuckle turned into a giggle, and the giggle turned into a laugh, and he laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. "That's the funniest thing I've ever seen," laughed Mr. Grumpy. And then Mr. Funny fell over on his huge red nose, and Mr. Grumpy roared with laughter again. He was laughing so hard he didn't hear Mr. Funny's muffled voice. "It's not funny. My nose is too heavy. I can't get up."